Our next guest is no stranger here. She's the all-time real estate debate champion and one of our favorite correspondents. Please welcome back real estate expert Elizabeth Story and her special guest, attorney Jason Ebert.
Welcome to the show, guys.
Hello.
Here they are. All right. Thanks for being here, Jason. Thank you. Nice to meet you. Good to see you. Ms. Story,
Yes.
as always, it's great to see you. We're actually going to be playing a preview to the reality show next week on the show. This will be the place you can see it first.
Okay.
But today, you wanted to bring on Jason because there's a lot of sort of understood problems or challenges with probate sales. And I think you wanted to help dispel some of that today.
Yeah, they really don't have to be complicated if everybody works together, knows what they're doing, uses the proper forms, marks the calendar for the time frames. You know, when there's probate, there's certain dates that you have to miss and certain notices that attorney will need to send out. But probate doesn't have to be overly complicated, especially one thing that probably does complicate it more often than not is when the heirs aren't in agreement. But if we can get those people on the same page, it could be almost as easy as any other transaction with just a few extra steps.
Really?
Yeah.
So it could be that simple then, Jason.
It could be. Probate is basically a process whereby the court appoints an administrator of a decedent's estate. That person is going to inventory and distribute assets according to either the will or California statutory rules. The important thing to remember is only assets titled in a decedent's name alone at death are going to be subject to probate. And so that's why I tell people, a lot of people don't know how their property is titled. Call Elizabeth. She can help you with that vesting question so you have some ideas.
Is there a better way to title the property in general?
Yeah, there are some ways. Some people, husband and wife as joint tenants is pretty common. I think Elizabeth could tell you community property with right of survivorship is very popular recently. But do remember that if both spouses are deceased in these situations, probate would be required unless you put the property into a trust or some other vesting.
Okay.
Which is my recommendation.
Yeah, I was going to say because just having a trust isn't enough. You have to vest the property that way.
Exactly.
Correct.
And that's a different step that I think some people forget that they have to take. Or maybe they don't even know that they have to take it. They think they get a trust. We did a trust. We got a trust. Yeah, but you didn't put the property in the name
Correct.
of the trust.
So it's really important to vest your property into the trust, and there's a couple ways to check on that. Elizabeth could pull the title report to the property and take a look, or you can check your property tax bill if you're concerned and you're not sure.
Okay. Yeah, so if you have a trust, but you're not sure if it's vested.
Exactly.
Okay. Anything else we should know about that?
Well, no, it's just something I make sure to bring up every single client that I've worked with. A lot of times you'll find more mature clients already know these things and they've got their trusts and they've handled it, but sometimes the younger or the first-time home buyers, they're not really familiar with this, and especially when you're buying a property with a loan, you can't buy the property in the name of the trust, so you do have to actually vest it into the trust after closing, but that's something that I can help with as well, so we can take care of that.
Probably same when you refinance too, huh?
Right, you have to take it out and put it back in. But you can change your vesting anytime. So if that's something that you're sitting there thinking right now, okay, I want to put my property into trust, give me a call. I have all the proper professionals, and Jason included, that we can help you with all the mechanics of that.
Okay. And so probate is one of those things people don't choose to do, right? It's something that just sort of happens. And so when people first learn about the word, a lot of times it's like because they're in it, right? Or they're involved in a probate situation. So I'm sure there are many things people could do to make it more complicated, but what are some of those things that maybe people could avoid, Jason?
What I would tell people, the reason it's important to use an experienced probate sales realtor is that right out the gate there's differences. So the probate listing agreement is different than a regular listing agreement. There's probate disclosures that are different, a probate advisory that goes along with it. And all these little differences are things that you would end up paying me to fix if your realtor doesn't know what they're doing. And so I've told Elizabeth, one of the things I look for right out the gate is if a realtor sends me a regular listing agreement in a probate sale, I'm happy to fix that, at my hourly rate, because I know that they're not exactly familiar with the process and it's important.
Okay, so there's a separate listing agreement.
Right, there's a separate listing agreement, and you can actually invalidate the transaction by doing things improperly. We had a real fun one a couple years back where the buyer wanted to change in the transaction, but you can't, it's not as simple with probate. You can't just simply change buyers because there's a notice that Jason has to send out and it has to be out for a certain amount of time. So it's important that everybody who completes the forms in a probate transaction uses the right forms, again, adheres to the guidelines and the time and the notices, and does it properly.
Okay, so you have different forms, you have a different listing agreement.
Yep.
That's probably going to be news to some of the people who are watching this show. And people need to know those things, but how would you know? I mean, if it just happens to you, right? Because that's what happens with probate, it just happens to you. So now you're in this situation, you need to have some trusty people that you can call.
Right.
Like you guys, you can get some people involved who know what they're doing and can take care of that, because you've got other things to worry about. Right, Jason? Isn't that the normal situation people are in? They have a lot of family things happening.
Right.
So it's really difficult to be so cognizant and clear about all the financial issues.
Exactly. It's important to remember that in an estate, any heir, any beneficiary, if they get that notice and they say they don't like the terms of the sale, they can gum up the works. So it's real important to have somebody with expertise in the real estate side as well as your attorney knowing to be transparent, to kind of bring people into the fold so that they can get that accomplished. All the while somebody's overwhelmed dealing with the loss of a loved one.
Yeah, and that's all happening at the same time. So it can be a difficult time for people.
Absolutely.
Elizabeth, what do you do differently to sell a home that's in this situation? Obviously, there's different paperwork and different things like that you have to do. I'm sure there's other things professionally that you have to do to sort of notify the buyer of the circumstances.
Right. Well, I think it's important to make sure that all heirs feel like their concerns are being heard. So if you can meet with and talk to as many of the heirs as possible so that they have a relationship with you as well, it makes them more comfortable with the transaction and a lot less likely that they're going to block it down the road. As Jason mentioned, they do have the power to do that. As far as the buyer's perspective, you would never want to hurt the value of the property or discourage people from buying it because it's probate. So if there was a real estate agent that wasn't super familiar, and it has happened before, that wasn't really super familiar with probate, I just help her. And her clients don't need to know that I was the one that was helping her, because again, my fiduciary responsibility to my client is to sell their property for the most money as fast as possible with the least amount of hassle. So if that requires me helping somebody, then I'm happy to do it. But it's not something where, like for example, we've talked about divorce on this show before too. You don't have to make it this big red flag or this big awful thing. It can still be a very pleasant transaction for everyone that's involved.
Yeah, no question. If you have the right people involved and that are able to take care of those complications so that you can worry about what you need to do.
Right. If you found yourself in a probate situation or if you have questions or concerns, please know that Jason and I are both available for a free consultation, or if you'd like some advice on setting up a trust, Jason and I can also help you with that, so please don't hesitate to give us a call.
Thank you guys so much for being here. Really appreciate your time. Stick around for more Smarter San Diego TV, where we guarantee to make you smarter than everyone else, commercial free.